Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pathways to Excellence. We have right here Mr. Teng Chan Leong, the CEO of Skribble Me Co. Thanks so much for being on this podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate the gesture.
Oh yeah, of course.
Super excited to be here.
So for those of you who are new to this channel, so Pathways to Excellence is a podcast that focuses on showcasing the educational journeys of incredible people around Malaysia, the world at large, and it's focused. Oops. Oh yeah. Alright, cool. So I met Chan Leong here at USApps, where I believe that you were the president at some point. Long time ago, like how many years was that?
Well, they've been around for 10 years. It's been more than 10 years since I was a participant, so
Oh yeah.
probably around.
You were here, you were at USApps when Chen Chao started USApps?
Not when it first started,
Not when it first
but I
started.
think the first, like 2009.
2009.
2009.
2009.
2009. 2008 or 2009. I think 2009 was when this happened.
I see, cool. Alright.
Like 13 years.
It's like when you just realize to yourself, wait a minute, my friends in high school are, like A, like married, or like B.
Have kids.
Yes, exactly. Amongst other things. Cool.
It is.
Okay, so to start us off then, so now I know that you're the CEO of Skribble Me, and then there's a whole bunch of like different things that happen along the way, but I guess like, maybe would you, share with us your journey, well, from the time when you were essentially a high school kid over towards studying in the US and eventually into this journey of entrepreneurship, because I think that you have like a very interesting perspective, speaking as someone who went, I guess, into higher education and then later went on to build an entrepreneurial career in Malaysia as well.
Right. So I think I'll start off where you wanted, which is in high school, right? So throughout the primary, secondary, or high school days, it's very boring. I think I'm a typical national kid growing up. So I go through the KBSM syllabus, you go through from 1 to Form 5, you take your SPM, and I think one of the biggest takeaway that I always share with people is that throughout that whole journey, all we were ever groomed to believe in is study hard, get a GPA scholarship, become an engineer, and you're sorted for life. So that was sort of the typical mold that a small town kid gets groomed to believe, right? And I was very lucky.
And you achieved it, like basically.
No, I did not, right? So I was very lucky that my one of my senior in high school actually introduced me to alternatives from the JPA scholarship, which is also another scholarship option, and also introduced me to a bigger world of tertiary education choices, right? And back in, it's more than 10 years ago, right? And back then, the US really isn't a desirable market. I think everybody wants to go to Singapore, UK, or Australia. That seems to be the top three. US is not even in the list of options for a lot of people, right? So I was very lucky to be exposed to that. To the idea and to the opportunity, applied for it, gotten the scholarship from Sime Darby, spent 2 years in KL, and then that's where I met you, I think, and then basically went into college in Carnegie Mellon for 4 years, doing chemical engineering, so I think kind of checked on the engineering box. But that's also where it ends, because the moment I came back, that's really not much chemical engineering that was practiced.
Yeah.
You were 6 years in corporate before I founded
Skribble, right. So that was like, I think you were the head of digital transformation at Sime Darby for a while before you eventually went into Skribble, right?
Correct. So cool. Even though my 6 years, I was bonded with Sime Darby, right? So I spent 6 years fulfilling my bond with the company, and I've always shared that these 6 years are very formative, in the sense that it's a very good reflection of what I have became throughout the uni days, and how a big chunk of the US education shaped my opportunities, perspective, and risk that I was willing to undertake within the corporate life. And even though it was all one of 6 years within the same group, I actually had 3 to 4 role transition, the last of which is the head of digital transformation at Sime Darby Property. But before that, I was actually in digital marketing. Before that, it was in IT strategy, and before that, it was in audit. So there's like 4 different roles throughout the 6 years.
I see. it's interesting that you connect, I guess, like education to that, because you've mentioned that yes, there were essentially no roles in chemical engineering per se, but I guess what part of your education do you feel was most reflected within, I guess, like your time at, shall we say, Sime Darby during those 6 formative years?
Right. So I think the biggest perspective that sort of lend me to the opportunities that I've gotten, especially within the corporate world, is the fact that you never truly are defined by the hard skills you gain. You are more defined by the knowledge and softer skill sets that you gain. So as a chemical engineer, the first thing that comes to people's mind is like, oh, if you are not working in the lab, if you're not working in the oil and gas space or pharmaceutical space, if there's no tank and there's no oils and no chemical, how are you practicing chemical engineering skill set, right? And
they'll be like, why, you go study for what?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the point of going to school? What's the point of sitting through the rigorous exams? And like, what are you going to get out of it? And the truth is, number one, it sounds cliche, but you do learn how to learn. Coming into school, you have no idea what chemical engineering is all about.
For sure.
You don't know much about thermodynamics, you don't know much about flow, you don't know much about basically the tertiary education, right? So you learn how to learn, and being able to learn how to learn, I think it makes you more comfortable to be in a position where, well, I've no idea what's going on, but I know I can learn, so let's just figure it out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Second is, as an engineer, and this is generic to most engineering students, you learn how to solve problems systematically, and that not only shaped how my career choices was in corporate, but also shaped what Skribble is today, right? Being able to help businesses systematically solve problems. And I think third, as a chemical engineer, we are really, really good with numbers and flow, and I think that is something that translates very well into later on the data science world, and subsequently also in the data consulting space. So that's sort of how the education space led. And then the fourth one is also the fact that even though I did chemical engineering as my major, actually I was very, very curious, right? So other than chemical engineering, I actually took a lot of courses in computer science, and that explains the IT digital space. I did a lot of work within psychology, economics, and statistics, and those were some of the key areas that I was really interested in. And a lot of the psychology and economics concept and theories that I've learned actually came in really, really handy when I was in the role of marketing, and now even in business. So those really come in really handy, even though it's 10 years apart.
Interesting. Would you share like a specific idea that maybe like comes to mind when you think about like things that you've studied about in psychology that you find relevance in, like even in your day-to-day?
Yeah. So I think one of my favorite concepts that I've learned from psychology is cognitive dissonance, right? It basically explains why people are so comfortable doing things that don't make sense, or doing irrational things, right? It's because they're able to justify to themselves how, if I'm doing this, that means I must be thinking this, that means I must believe in it. And it really is very useful theory to know, because then you learn about like the application of that includes how do you make people like you, asking for help if you want someone to like you, ask them for help, right? You understand a lot more about the bystander theory, you understand a little bit more about how people make decisions, and how actually purchase is more emotional than it is rational.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Truly see that in action, right? So within our sphere, we are very strong when it comes to property, real estate. And one of the things I've always spoken to property founders or developers is that actually the market doesn't really know a property price. If you go out to them and start surveying people on like, hey, how much do you think that house actually is worth? Most people actually can't tell the price. But how can you then spend a couple $100,000 on something you can't even value yourself, right? And that's where all this price psychology comes in.
I see, cool. Yeah. Well, with that in mind, so maybe would you share with me a little bit about how Skribble came to be? I mean, I was like looking at your website, I was like talking to Wei-Wen earlier about like how it seems like you do everything. Like there are more things that you do that you do not do. It seems to not make sense right there, but you're involved in like digital marketing, you're involved in like business consulting, then you mentioned earlier data science. I don't doubt that you do that as well. Then like you have a whole list of clients. I'll be showing this basically like on the
corporate
screen later.
GLC, smaller clients, etc.
Sure.
I think to be honest, we only do one thing, right? The one thing that we do is solving problems for businesses. Everything else that we package as a service basically common areas where businesses normally have problems to be solved. So it starts off with business consulting, right? I think that's just a very easy way to say, well, if you have a problem, come to me, we'll try and figure it out. And that's basically business consulting. And very soon we kind of realized that a lot of businesses don't really know what the problems are, right? So they won't even tell you, hey, Chan Leong, my product has a pricing problem, can you help me fix it? A lot of times the problem manifests itself in very weird ways of like, Chan Leong got no sales. But it could be a factor of design, creative, marketing, sales channel, distribution channel, pricing, product, and there's so many different factors that could go into it, but it manifests itself as like, oh, there's no sales, right? Or there's not enough sales. So then we started to realize that, wow, if I want to solve problems for businesses, I can't just be so single-minded and say, if I only do A, but what if the problems can't be solved by A? What if the diagnosis needs B, C, D, E, F, G, right? That's where everything else comes.
I see, cool.
So I'll summarize our business into 3 pillars. One is in business and business consulting. That's understanding numbers, understanding operations, risk, governance, and management. Second one is within the creative space or marketing and sales space. I think more specific to today's world would be the digital marketing side of things, so social media, website, content, design, creative, videos. And the third one is in technology, which is, I guess, in our case, more commonly sold as software development. So with these 3, most businesses actually can be streamlined into just 4 different pillars, right? The niche that you are in, whether it's F&B, fashion, airlines, and whatnot, that's the business niche. And then you always have a business component, a marketing component, and a tech component. So I think we try to own the three area, so we can parachute ourselves into any niches that needs our help.
Fascinating. So then, would you share maybe what led you, right, from, I guess, being at Sime Darby to not continue in that, but instead to decide to venture out on your own? Like, how did those days kind of, well, look for you as you were on the verge of starting your business? So like, was it an easy decision, or was it like maybe something that was difficult but you felt that you had to do it?
Right.
How was that experience for you?
I think it's a very easy decision, or maybe because this is in retrospect, right? It seemed really easy.
You can only connect the dots looking back.
It wasn't as obvious, obviously, when I was there. It wasn't as obvious, but it definitely wasn't a difficult decision. And I think a lot of people left their corporate world in pursuit of work-life balance, or in pursuit of independence and freedom and all that beautiful jazz. That isn't really why I left the corporate. In fact, I was having a tremendous time in the corporate world. I love the corporate world, I love the politics, I love the game, I love the grind. I mean, I love everything about the structure, the impact that we had as a big corporation, right? So, and I was very, very lucky to have very, very good opportunities throughout my career there. So I got parachuted, like I climbed the quote-unquote corporate ladder relatively fast. And unfortunately, I think that was the part of the reasons why I felt that it's such an easy decision to leave. So one is, as in the corporate world, unfortunately, there's not enough, you don't really get a lot of ownership no matter how senior you are in a particular project. Right? At the end of the day, it's always a compromise between your stakeholders, your partners, your peers, your team, your boss, and everyone else, right? And at the end of it, there really isn't a semblance of what you are proud of anymore. It really is just a compromise of everyone's input, because you try to make everyone happy.
I see.
So the lack of ownership makes me feel like, I can never call something as my own, right? It will always be just work, right? And I felt I really needed that ownership. Second is that because I got up to the corporate world so quickly, even if I were to take a 10-year career break and come back later, my safety net is that I can just resume wherever I was. And at that point, digital was a relatively new space, so I was able to lead the digital team relatively at a young age, to a point where even if I were at that role, if I was 10 years older, I would still be considered young. That's a pretty safe place to be in. So it would be silly of me to not take that risk. Right? So I think that's why it makes that made it an easy decision, because my safety net was there. And I know this is a very privileged conversation, and I always tell people that not everyone has the opportunity to be in that privileged position. So I do recognize the privilege in that decision, but it's because it was so privileged that it's silly to not do it.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel in any way that, I guess, like, taking the actions that you did had anything to do with something that you had learned or that you had encountered during the course of your education? Or do you think that it's kind of like, well, I mean, like, even if we think about like what education is, right? Like, we learn from every single area of our lives, I guess. But, well, do you feel that there was anything in particular, right, connected to maybe like studying in the US or at Carnegie Mellon in particular that, well, eventually led somewhere down the line towards, well, the choices that you made?
No, 100%. So, like you alluded to earlier, right? I do think we are a manifestation of the collective decisions and experiences that we have throughout. Whether it is a trauma from a kid, the experience, the friends you make, the environment you get to be a part of throughout that period. So, the university days, I think, shape a couple of things in what we are today. I think first is the open education, right? The understanding that there is really no defined pathway to excellence. It really is pursuing your interests, and as long as you're putting the right heart and soul into learning and in pursuit of the knowledge, you are going to be more open to seeing what you want to see, right? It's kind of like the law of attraction, where the more you do something, the more it opens up opportunity within that space, right? The second is that within Carnegie Mellon specifically, my school is very academically rigorous, right? I think it prides itself in being able to go through a particular intellectual discourse and go through it in detail, right? We're not a commercial school where we just want to churn out engineers that can make money. We do want engineers who at some point want to contribute back to research, who want to contribute back to science and bring out new knowledge. So there's a lot of academic rigor in how we do things, and that shapes a lot of how I carry myself. Because in whatever we do today, even if it's as simple as running a Facebook ad or running a Google ad, it's something that any freelancer can do, right? And anyone with any knowledge of technology could just click a button and run an ad, right? But we want to be really rigorous with what we do, truly understand, well, when we click that button, actually what happens behind the scene? How does the ad get displayed? How does audiences get created? What at a fundamental layer, what's actually happening? And I believe that having that rigorous understanding to things makes us different from our competitors, and it creates a very unique edge that even if my competitor know what we're doing, they can't copy it, because even if you want to, you just don't have that rigor to do things as gritty as we would have.
I see. Okay. Carnegie Mellon is composed of two last names, is it not? So, like, for example, Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate, and then basically Andrew Mellon, the global financier.
Yeah.
I mean, like, so what did it mean to you, I guess, to be a part of that institution, and like, how did you feel about it? Because like, it's not just an engineering school, right? Correct. Not just a computer science school. It's also like a drama school,
yes,
if I'm not wrong. Great English literature as well. But I mean, like, what attracted you at that initial point to go to that school, I guess?
I think the truth is that I don't think I found CMU. I think CMU found me, right? So during the
wow,
during the whole application,
law of attraction indeed.
I know, right? During the whole application process, I think I had a list of schools that we want to be part of, and I think if you were part of the podcast, you would know about the whole reach and safety and all that strategy in applying to schools. And Carnegie Mellon was, like it or not, was a more realistic choice compared to the rigorousness of MIT and Stanford and the other Ivies. So CMU was I guess a safe reach. But at the same time, I really got appealed to this whole idea of doing things properly, and I felt like there's a part in me, like an engineering part of me that got excited about doing things properly and truly understanding things. So that I thought, that's a really good school. I don't really know what it's like to study there, like the lifestyle and the culture and all that part, but at least from the philosophy of education, it makes sense. So I applied for early decision to that school.
Wow.
In addition to a bunch of other schools, but because and that's how I say the school chose me, right? Because the school decided to admit me on ED, basically I had to say no to all the other schools. Right?
I see, okay.
That's how I end up in CMU.
I see, cool. It's funny that you mentioned the law of attraction, because I don't know if you know this, but Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich was formulated on the basis of interviews that essentially the man had with Andrew Carnegie. So I was thinking like, okay, like very law of attraction, think and grow rich, millionaire mind type of thing right there. Okay.
And then Andrew Carnegie behind everything. But the crazy thing, I guess this crazy fun fact is that the moment I got there and started to learn about the history of Pittsburgh as a city, I realized that I just went back to Taiping, and I came from Taiping. Right? It's one of the facts that I'm most proud about. Then Taiping is it's not a steel city, it's a tin city, right? Taiping was founded mainly because of the tin mining industry, and that's why we have the first of many things in the country, right? We have the first railroad to ship tin to the port. We have the first train station, the first prison, because tin miners are gangsters and they fight and they need a prison. We have a lot of first hospital and first zoo or whatever, right?
I see. Okay.
So we do have a lot of that. Then when I went to Pittsburgh, I realized, if the town that I grew up in, at its peak was a tin city. In Pittsburgh, at its peak was a steel city. So I really felt the connection of like, I guess I'm just going back home to Taiping.
Wow. So going back home then, so you did mention a couple of things, like for example, checklists, like study hard, get JPA scholarship, nope, got Sime Darby scholarship instead, study engineering, yes, indeed, amazing. But back there in that home in Taiping, I guess, what was motivating you? What was driving you to do well in your education and to push forward to eventually, successfully grasp that path? Because it's not a common path to be able to grasp onto in the first place.
So throughout my high school days, it wasn't as if I'm trying to be good and get good grades. I was very, very lucky that I've always been good at testing, so I've always been good at results and scoring and all that. So it wasn't really again, it's a privileged conversation, but I wasn't trying, right? I think the biggest motivating factor to why I did so much, right? If you're not trying and succeeding, why are you doing more, right? It's because I got so damn in typing. There's just you bored out of your brain that there's something else to do, right? So you just started finding out for new things to do, right? So any option, so any options that says not this would have been great. So let's just keep doing not that, and that's how I end up in the States. So not sure if it's good advice, but just don't want to be bored.
Okay, no, that's totally understandable.
But it changed after I landed in CMU. I think the perspective to education and the pursuit of knowledge really started when I was in university. So that's when I was first challenged, and suddenly I'm not the best anymore. I'm not the smartest anymore. I'm actually in a lot of classes. There were several classes that I get C's from. Right? I think biochem was one of the things that I no matter how hard I studied, I could just never get it. So suddenly you found limits, and you're not the smartest at everything anymore.
Yep.
And there's this silly things that keep on pursuing, right? For example, economics. I wasn't very good in econs. I hated getting B's in econs, but I loved it so much that I kept taking classes in it. Right? So then you start to realize that grades don't really define you anymore, because you're willing to tank a grade just to be part of a class.
Right.
Yeah. So that's when the perspective changed.
That's interesting, because one of the things that people tend to do, right, is that they pursue education specifically for the goal of so I would like to get a better life. And I think that yes, you do need to have a quid pro quo along the way, right? Otherwise, why would you be doing something right there? Yeah. But I get a sense right here that you appreciated the fact that you were challenged, somewhere beyond where you happened to be, in Malaysia. Now, why is that? Why appreciate the fact that you were actually challenged?
I think at that point, it's really hard to digest the feelings and the thoughts while you're in that process, right? I do think a big chunk of it came from the upbringing that I had in a small town, in a traditional family, that it's not an option to be bad. Right? So the moment you're in a position where you're not good anymore, suddenly you do feel the pressure of I'm not doing well, I need to do well. So I think that instinct kicked in, right? But I really don't think that it was something that was thought out or processed. I think it was just really instinctive.
I see, interesting. Yeah, because I'm sure a lot of people would want to make it be all I want to get from point A to point B. I want my life to be easy rather than difficult along the way.
So that's something I was missing. So during the school days, I didn't have a point B. I think again, right, just from the upbringing, to me, getting a degree and then getting a job was sort of the point B, right? It doesn't matter what job you do, you just have to get a job. That was point B. Only when I started working that I started to realize that I don't just want to get a job. I actually want to get a comfortable life. So then there's a pursuit of comfort, and I say, there are certain things I really want to do, and there are certain things I really don't want to do, right? So then you started pursuing comfort. I think only when I started working that I truly appreciated that, or I guess that is a destination rather than just a direction.
I see. Okay, cool. So now maybe let's talk a little bit about, well, how you ended up, well, advocating for US education. So maybe will you share a bit about how you got involved with USApps and, well, what led you to continue that involvement over the course of the years? Because like last time I saw you was at the last USApps, and that's like 2023. So you said that essentially you started in 2009, so you've been involved for like 14 years.
It is. So
Yeah.
I do think that the reasons change throughout, because obviously when you're still so close to the education institution, it's a lot easier for you to preach for it, a lot easier for you to see yourself being involved. But then now that we are 10 years from graduation, right, there is a degree of I guess not as familiar with what it was used to be. So at the beginning stages, it was number one, paying it forward, because I benefited from the fact that when I was a participant, there were so many alumni and so many existing current students that came back on a voluntary basis as facilitators to guide us through the process, and it was a difficult process, right? So the moment I got accepted and the moment I knew that I could give back, there's just no doubt that of course you need to give back. How else are you going to repay the people that have came before you, right? So that voluntary effort kind of continued for the next couple of years, and it helped that the experience there was fun. You meet nice people, you meet fun people, you meet similar people, and it's a fun experience to be a part of. So that paying it forward very quickly turned into camaraderie and friendship and kinship and just excitement, right? And many years down the road now, I barely recognize the faces that are actually running the sessions, that are organizing it, that are coming back to talk and share, right? But for me now, it's more pushing the agenda of getting the wider audience to know about this concept of education. So it isn't so much about paying it forward, it isn't even really so much about the network and the friends anymore. I think now it's just trying to push the agenda of an education option for Malaysian students.
Well, education exists in many different ways, shapes, and forms. So then, I mean, you could be a Grab driver and then also be receiving a certain kind of education.
Yeah, for sure.
But I guess, well, what leads you to be passionate about promoting, well, this particular stream or variant of education, I guess, like to Malaysians at large?
Well, I think I don't think I am necessarily pushing for a particular stream of education. I do acknowledge the different pros and cons of a UK education, of a Canadian education, of an Australian education, or even of a Malaysian education, or the street education, right?
Yeah.
So
we could talk about it in a wider perspective as well. So like, I guess, why promote education in the first
in
place?
general. So I feel like education in general is important because that, especially for a typical high school or typical college age teenager, I guess they will be teenager or young adult at that point, it's a very defining period of their life. Whether or not they make it or break it in their career, of course that's not the only factor, but it's definitely a very defining factor of the experience that they will experience as a young professional. So being not necessarily the quality of academia, but the quality of environment plays a huge difference on what you see, learn, do, and experience, right? So to me, it would be a shame if someone skipped the entire process and then come into the workforce. I think what we see now that we are hiring, what we see is that people who spend a big chunk of their university days, especially the final years of their university days during the MCO period where they were studying from home, really does have a huge disadvantage when it comes to them being a contributing member. In fact, there's a lot of gaps that they experience because of that simple 2 years that they missed out.
I see. Okay.
So if 2 years make that much of a difference and they're still in the whole academic environment, right? Imagine 4 years without the academic environment. It would be very detrimental.
Can you, I guess, like, share a little bit about like what specifically those 2 years cause people to miss out on that they could have acquired otherwise?
One of the things that I think you learn is having a safe space for you to experiment with yourself, right? So let's say you're forced into a group project. you're not really going to think about it as like a social experiment, right? But to you just have to get right, get the work done. So when you're in that position, you're gonna be exposed to different people and different working styles. Suddenly, you need to figure out who are you in the context of a trouble, like in a problematic team, for example. Who are you? In the context of a highly performing team, who are you? Right? In the context of a poor performing team, who are you? Right? Are you always the follower? Are you always the leader? Do you always take charge? Are you willing to compromise? Are you willing to step up? Are you willing to criticize? Are you willing to be criticized? These are social skills that you learn in a very, very safe environment. Can you learn the same skills outside? Of course. The problem is then you remove the fence. There's no longer the barrier of this is just school, this is just one project, this is just one semester. You lost that barrier. So then now you're out in the world trying to work with other people without that barrier, and you started fighting, but then it doesn't end because your colleague will be your colleague for a long term, whereas your project mate will only be your project mate for that one semester. So that I think that boundary or the experience of being in that boundary makes you learn differently and makes it a lot easier for you to experiment different styles. And if you regretted what you did in the previous project, you still have multiple projects for you to then say, you know what, I guess I was a little bit of a dick in the past few projects. If people are all saying that I'm not pulling my weight, then maybe I should reconsider that. But if you're in a work environment and you're labeled as you're just not pulling the weight, it's very hard for you to come out from that.
I see, okay. So definitely, so having a fence and having protection basically allows you to explore more, maybe like learn more along the way as well.
Correct, and be brave to try because you know there's padding, right?
For sure. Okay, so to kind of then move right from like that fenced sort of like environment over to your current experience with Skribble, which I'm gonna just put this around right now because like this is like pretty fascinating. 25 million. So can you explain that right now?
Well, they say if your goal doesn't scare you, then you're not setting a goal big enough, right? So that scares me. And it scares me twice because you can look at it and say, wow, when are you ever going to hit 25 million revenue? And then even after you hit that 25 million revenue, you're going to say, hey, when are you going to hit that 25 million profit? And it's a totally different ballgame again, right? So that number will scare me and will continue to scare me for a long period of time. But I think it sets a goal far enough for us to achieve. And I actually believe in this, right? I think throughout my formative years and even throughout my career, I've always had goals that I've not really defined really well. I very simple things like, I wish I have this amount in savings. I wish I have this multiple stream of income. I wish I can earn this much. I wish I can do this much. I wish I can travel. And so I have a lot of soft goals that I've always thought, it would be nice if I could do that. But very surprisingly, you've always been able to hit the goal. Then at some point you're thinking, maybe the goal that you're setting is just really too small, right? Like if you don't even try, if you don't really try and you're hitting all your goals, then maybe you just have to like sit down and figure out what's a goal that is tough. And that's a tough goal.
I see, okay, cool. Then I guess, how did you, so like in your own words I guess, how did Skribble become what it is today? And how does that relate, I guess, to, like your personality, like the things that you did along the way, or maybe like any accidents that may have transpired as well?
So I think, of course, this is going to be like a simplified version of the story, right? But Skribble, in a lot of ways, is an amplification of me. From the very foundation, or from the very beginning of what Skribble is trying to do, Skribble is trying to solve problems, and that's an ambition that came from me personally. Because I told you about how I was during my corporate days, I figured out that I was seeking comfort. One reason why I'm seeking comfort is because I have so much joy in being able to isolate myself and just solve problems in front of my eyes. So that I got no distractions, right? I don't have to worry about laundry and house chores and food and whatever else, right? You want to sit down there and
little inconvenient things like biological restrictions.
Yeah, like having to go to the toilet, right? So
having to breathe.
having to breathe, maybe. So that in a business context or in a larger context translated to, I just really want Skribble to be able to focus and just solve business problems for other businesses.
I see.
Right? So I think that is an amplification of who I am. The way we do things, the way we try not to be calculative with our clients, the way we try to be the best in the industry, the way we try to be the best at what we do, the way we try to honor the promises that we make, the way we treat our people, and the way we define the norms. This is still one of the only agencies that I know of that our designers don't really work overtime. Okay. You heard about horror stories about like design firms where designers work to 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Okay. We've never wanted our designers to do that, and in most cases they don't. Right? It's still one of the few things that we are proud of because we treat our people like humans. And I'm very surprised that unfortunately that is not baseline. I do think that treating people like humans should be baseline. Unfortunately in Malaysia, it's still not the norm.
I see, yeah, definitely. I have a question that will then transition into where we will end. So then, will you share the story of how you inspired the first person to join your team then? Like, how did that happen? Because like, as a new founder, maybe like you'd be like wondering, okay, I need people to help me on this project right here. So then, how did you eventually sort of like bring that vision to bear to someone, and how did that person eventually join you?
We lie through our teeth.
Okay.
But it's not that far
from
it's not that far from it, to be honest. Because when we first started, I don't think that any founder in his right mind would ever say that this is definitely gonna make it. If I have the confidence that this really is gonna make it, then again, right, it comes back to what I was saying. Maybe the goal is just too small, right? We have to be able to set a goal that's big enough that maybe we are a little bit unsure of like, is it really gonna happen? Don't know, but it's worth trying. Okay. The goal is big enough that it's worth trying. Okay. Right. So the first few people that we hired, actually the first few people that we offered to, all rejected. Right? We have candidates who applied. We didn't even bother to negotiate for salary because we know we didn't have the brand credentials. We didn't really have the crack to demand a negotiation. So we just offered whatever they're asking for, and they still rejected me. So which begs the question: then why are you even in that coming to the interview, right? Anyway, the first few people that accepted the offer, I think accepted with a few promises in mind. One is that you get to be at the forefront of a founder trying to build his business from scratch, and that's not really a chance that you get to see much. Number two, I think these are also people who believed in the same principles and values that we believed in, about trying to make a difference in the industry, trying to do things the right way, and trying to build a team that can maintain that harmonious culture as we grow bigger. Okay. And a lot of the people that we have today, a lot of people that started obviously isn't with us anymore. I think we have maybe very good retention rate. Like don't get me wrong. I think maybe 4 people that started with us is still with us today. But back then it was a 3-4 man team, right? So we barely lost anyone from that perspective. But along the way, there are definitely people who come and go. But I think the people who came, whether it's the first month or the first year or subsequently, came and stayed because they believe in what we are trying to do and enjoy this culture and being a part of something bigger and growing, that I think in another workspace would not have been so transparent and and harmonious.
I see. Cool. Okay. So speaking then about inspiring or essentially, getting people on board, I guess if you were to try to get people on board, right, with wanting to pursue education or become like the best version of themselves right there, like what would you want to say to them? Like why should a person like go ahead, pursue an education? I mean, somebody could very well go up to you and say like, Abang Chan Leong. I mean, like, I say Abang Chan Leong because I know that you're part of
15-year-old, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you speak Malay as well, right?
Right, I speak very good Malay.
Okay, so Abang Chan Leong, apa sah saya nak buatkan pendidikan tinggi ni? Kenapa saya nak jadi mahasiswa? Saya boleh buat duit sekali-sekala dengan buat Grab, buat Lala Move. So, what you say to them?
They could do it lah. So I think one of my biggest pet peeve is I really don't want to convince you to lead your life. And to me, that's really not my job. If you really do want to waste your life, then you should probably go do it lah, right? So if someone needs convincing that they need to do the right thing, then I'm probably the worst person for them to talk to, because I'll definitely encourage them to like do whatever they want to do. And that will continue to be true, because I don't believe that there's one defined pathway to success. The person who came up to me, and although it sounded ridiculous that it's wrong of him to want to start working now, it's wrong for him to want to start making money now, it's wrong for him to just take the easy step now, that by no means is a wrong choice. In the long term, it might be the right choice. And just because he's not pursuing education today does not mean that he or she would not go back to education one day. And also again, right, back to this whole idea that there are different education pathways in the world. There's no one can say that that particular grind of being in the workforce early isn't in itself an experience and an education that is worthwhile. So I would never try to steer you away from what you are committed to doing. But if you come to me and you say that you're committed to like, one day I want to be successful too, I really don't know what I want to do, but I'm willing to do what it takes, what should I do? Then I would definitely put you on a path where your options are going to grow rather than to be limited. I think in the Grab example, Grab or part-time or hustle example you gave earlier, right? One of my biggest problem with that, and the reason why I wouldn't recommend someone who don't believe in it to do it, is because it keeps your options really limited, right? You don't really expand your skill set while you are doing that particular job, right? If you're like, so that particular hustle and grind keeps your option very, very single-minded or very, 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 very single-pathed. And doesn't mean that path is wrong. It just means that there's not much option. Whereas going to an education allows you to broaden your options. And you can still make a wrong choice after you graduate from school, right? You can still decide that I want to do X, and then maybe you're not good in X, but you want to do it anyway because you feel like doing it, and that could be your wrong choice. So, but it doesn't change the fact that it opens up your option wider than what that single focus would be. So if you already know what you want to do, regardless of how good or bad it sounds, you should probably go do it, right? I don't think you can do any wrong as long as you have the grit and heart to actually do something. The worst you can ever be is to say, I don't want to do anything. That it really is the worst of the worst, right?
It's making a choice.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Wow, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Chan Leong, thank you so much for this interview.
Oh, thanks Victor for having me.
Alright.
Appreciate it.
For
Thank
sure.
you.
25 mil, right there. Coming up soon, ladies and gentlemen. Coming up soon.
Fingers crossed. Double fingers crossed. Thanks a lot, Victor, for
Thank you
coming
so
here.
much.
Take care.
Oh gosh.